Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency President William Ruto and His Excellency Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong have just concluded their bilateral talks and will now address you on the outcomes and scope of the talks. Journalists will have an opportunity to ask questions after their joint news briefing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency Lee Hsien Loong, Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore, honorable members of your delegation, Kenya government officials, distinguished guests, I take this opportunity to welcome my brother, Your Excellency, and your delegation to Kenya. On behalf of the government and people of Kenya, please, by all means, feel at home while you are away from Singapore. Your Excellency, I know that COVID-19 delayed your visit to Kenya as originally scheduled, but I thank you for making this very first visit to Kenya. Kenya is happy and proud to host you, and your presence is a strong gesture of the friendship between our two people and Kenya and Singapore. The Prime Minister and I have had a fruitful engagement during which we discussed how we can work together with Singapore to develop a mutually beneficial strategic partnership in a dynamic and very competitive global marketplace. We have agreed to develop a long-term strategic partnership between our two countries anchored on many sectors of our mutually beneficial relationship. We have discussed the potential of the Nairobi International Financial Center serving Sub Saharan Africa, particularly Eastern and Central Africa region, especially on matters green financing, and Singapore's successful experience and best practices is an asset to us on this particular venture. I have noted also that Enterprise Singapore has already opened offices in Nairobi, and I have committed to Prime Minister that the government of Kenya is going to work with Enterprise Singapore to make sure that they have what it takes to build the necessary networks and partnerships between private sector companies in Kenya, private sector companies in Singapore, and to ensure that we exploit the full potential of trade, business, and investment between our two countries. Digitization of the economy and government services in all sectors is an enabler for our bottom-up economic transformation agenda. We want to run an efficient and paperless economy and society. A collaboration between Kenya and Singapore, who have a history of innovation, is key, hence the inclusion of the ICT sector in our strategic partnership between our two countries. I am happy to inform you that His Excellency Loong and I witnessed the signing of 3 memoranda of understanding on ICT, which will facilitate cooperation on cybersecurity, digitization of government services, ICT capacity building, among the other areas. We also signed another MOU on skills development to facilitate collaboration in human resource capacity building for civil servants and students, particularly in specific areas that need to support a sustainable socioeconomic development priorities, especially the ones we have identified in Kenya. As we all understand, the Tibet space is the engine for providing the human capital necessary to assist us in driving our Vision 2030 and our economic development blueprint as a government. We have also agreed that the bilateral investment treaty signed between our two nations on 12th June 2018 be immediately operationalized. we further directed our respective ministers to conclude negotiations on avoidance of double taxation within the shortest time possible. And we believe this will spark and grow trade and investment opportunities between Kenya and Singapore. We have also agreed to actively explore methods of acquiring knowledge and support from Singapore's highly prosperous housing model. Kenyans are currently engaged in the housing debate, with approximately 6.5 million Kenyans lacking affordable and decent housing. Singapore has one of the most successful stories on matters of public housing. The Prime Minister has informed me that 85% of all Singaporeans live in decent, affordable public housing. Their story and journey did not start overnight. It began 60 years ago, around the same time we established our housing policy in Kenya. They took some hard decisions and made some sacrifices where they undertook mandatory savings, and the results are there for everyone to see. We are 60 years late in taking this bold step. As a result, our country is infamous for having some of the largest informal settlements that number in excess of 1,140 slums. I don't want us to postpone this agenda anymore, and thus I am asking Kenyans to make the choice by saving into the housing fund so that 60 years from now, we can also have a similar success story to tell. We have invited Singaporeans' private sector to consider investment opportunities in our transport and logistics sectors. We've also explored the potential of Singapore becoming a gateway for Kenya's agricultural products to the ASEAN region. The Prime Minister and I share the view that climate change represents the greatest existential threat to the survival of mankind, and collective and cooperative action by all governments is of utmost importance. It is for this reason that I shared the objectives of the forthcoming Africa Climate Summit, which Kenya will host in September this year. The summit will cohere a common African position for COP28, including an articulation of climate finance and climate investment solutions for climate change action. This will propel the continent from a passive victim to an active participant in climate change solutions. Prime Minister Loong has expressed his support for us having concurrent positions on matters climate change, because they, as well as us, face the same threat in equal measure. On this urgent issue of climate change, our ministers have signed an MOU on carbon credit collaboration, which provides a framework for the trading of carbon credits between our two countries in line with the stipulation of the Paris Agreement. The agreement also provides for the exchange of information, knowledge, best practices, and capacity building on carbon credits, plus collaboration on projects which will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Prime Minister Loong and I also agreed on the urgent need to reform both the global peace and security infrastructure as well as the multilateral financial architecture to ensure that these institutions are equitable, fair, and fit for purpose in responding to multifaceted global challenges. Kenya and Singapore will continue to work closely on areas of mutual interest, and we have shared with His Excellency Prime Minister Kenya's contribution to regional peace initiatives. Additionally, I shared Kenya's position on the need to reform the UN Security Council to make it much more inclusive and reflective of the current global order and dynamics. It is important for like-minded countries like Kenya and Singapore to support common positions. On the status of the UN office in Nairobi, Prime Minister Loong and I agreed that the renovation and expansion of facilities to match other UN offices globally is a welcome development. The upgraded facility will accommodate at least 9,000 conference delegates at any meeting, and Singapore will work with us, especially in the upcoming UN Assembly, where discussions on these facilities' improvement will be held at the UN in New York. In conclusion, Prime Minister Loong and I committed to having an annual high-level meeting consultation on our collaboration in financial services and ICT sectors. The financial sectors will focus on climate financing, while ICT will center on digitization of the economy, including raising the capacity of micro, small, and medium enterprises to make them much more efficient and incorporate them into the formal economy. These core areas form the basis of our strategic partnership for the benefit of the people of Singapore and the people of Kenya. Your Excellency, once again, on behalf of the people of Kenya, I am truly grateful that you found time to visit us, and I have responded to your request that early next year, by God's grace, I will make a visit to Singapore. Thank you very much and welcome.
President William Ruto, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon.
I thank President Ruto for his warm hospitality and his warm words. This is my first official visit to Kenya, and I'm delighted to be here today. Despite being geographically quite distant, Singapore and Kenya have similar outlooks. Our peoples share similar aspirations, such as inclusive growth, a high standard of living, ethnic and religious harmony, and good housing, healthcare, education. We share similar views on the challenges faced by the Global South. We both worry about growing geopolitical tensions, rising protectionism, threats to the multilateral trading system, inflation, pandemics, and climate change. We agreed that it was important that countries continue to work towards building linkages in the digital economy, cooperating on food, energy security, and sustainable development. The President and I reaffirmed the warm and long-standing relations between Singapore and Kenya. 2 years ago, we celebrated our 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations, and our two countries cooperate and exchange experiences in areas such as governance, public service administration, urban planning, and livable cities. Our economic cooperation has been growing. Kenya is one of Singapore's important trading partners in Sub Saharan Africa. Despite COVID, bilateral trade in 2021 increased by almost a quarter year on year. Several Singapore companies are operating in Kenya in a variety of sectors: shipping, logistics and port management systems, agribusiness, hospitality and fintech solutions, amongst others. A delegation of Singapore companies is in Nairobi. They came with me to pursue opportunities for investments and partnerships with Kenyan companies. Our two countries also collaborate well in multilateral fora. President Ruto and I reaffirmed our shared commitment to multilateralism and a rules-based global order. Singapore and Kenya agreed to continue our cooperation at the UN and other multilateral co-organizations and to cooperate on UN reform to enhance its effectiveness. We discussed new areas of cooperation, first on information and communication technologies. We just signed an MOU in this area, which will allow both sides to exchange best practices and knowledge in ICT and promote talent development and innovations. The MOU will also facilitate and strengthen strategic cooperation in cybersecurity. Secondly, on climate change, we signed an MOU in carbon credits collaboration under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and this will encourage, develop, and facilitate collaborative carbon credit projects of mutual interest. International collaboration, such as this agreement between Singapore and Kenya, is critical to promoting global climate action to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Third, on human capital development. Both our countries placed heavy emphasis on nurturing talent. The MOU on skills development will encourage closer technical cooperation between both countries in areas such as leadership and governance, education, and digitalization. And this will take place through knowledge exchange, capacity building courses, and other cooperation. There is great potential to expand our bilateral cooperation. Kenya's strategic location serves as a gateway for Singapore companies into East Africa. Likewise, Singapore can serve as a gateway for Kenyan companies into Southeast Asia. I welcome the ratification of the Bilateral Investment Treaty and the President's commitment to settle the avoidance of the double taxation agreement between our two countries as soon as possible. These moves send a strong positive signal to businesses and provide clarity and assurance on the cross-border transactions and investment. I look forward to working with President Ruto and his government to bring our bilateral relations to even greater heights. I'm very happy that the President has accepted my invitation to visit Singapore, and I look forward to receiving him before too long, and if all goes well, early next year. Thank you very much.